And we're back. Chuck Augustin to my left. I'm Tom Gibson, and we're talking about the New World Order and how it affects people in Pahrump. And it affects them because anything that happens in the world, and which affects the United States, which affects Nevada, affects us here in Nye County. I want to get on a little bit on the Rothschilds. They're they are the wealthiest family in the world. They own, I think it's $4 trillion, or maybe it's more than that. But they're by far the most influential, and their family owns half of the world's wealth. Okay, and if you think about that, half of the entire world's wealth, the Rothschilds own, and 500 trillion. Sorry, I stand corrected. I have this little statement here. It talks about the Rothschild philosophy that the law is force in disguise, and that right lies in force, and the right to rule lies in force. Okay, so it has nothing to do with one man, one vote, or
right.
Who the best person is. It's who they're going to decide who you're going to vote for. Political freedom is an idea, not a fact. In order to usurp political power, all that is necessary is to preach liberalism, and the electorates will give up more power to the co-conspirators. Money is all powerful. Governments are insignificant compared to money. And since governments control the money, that control must be removed from the governments and put in the hands of the conspirators. Any and all means to achieve the goal of world domination by the world conspirators is justified. The size, scope, and power of the conspirators' resources must remain hidden. Alcohol, drugs, moral corruption shall be used to weaken the will of the people. Wars should be instigated and orchestrated so that both sides will be in their debt. In other words, the conspirators would gain profit and power no matter who wins the wars. Propaganda and control of information should be used to influence opinion, and pre-planned and artificially manipulated financial panics and depression should be used to tame the people and weaken governments so as to ultimately form a one-world government within the conspirators as rulers. So if you have any, give any stock to what some of the conspiratory theories are regarding the Rothschilds, those 9 parts of their philosophy fit completely into exactly what's gone on in America over the last 100 years, but it has accelerated in the last 10, 15, 20 years.
Right, and again, this world order, or New World Order, one of the names that is given to the head, these 13 or so families or bloodlines that control it, is the Illuminati. And the Illuminati goes back to Bavaria and a guy named Adam Weishaupt. And he basically organized a bunch of fellow rich people. And again, if you watch Dan Brown, oh shoot, now I forgot, the sequel to the Da Vinci Code, Angels and Demons. Yeah. They talk about the Illuminati, and they were the supposed bad guys behind this bomb that was going to blow up the Vatican. At any rate, this organization, the Illuminati, it so happens, was founded in 1776. And for those who are astute in our country's history, you might recognize that date, as that was the date that this country was founded. Now, there are many, many coincidences or synchronicities or whatever you want to call it that happens in our lives and in history. And I've had so many happen to me personally. And by synchronicities, I mean that something happens and son of a gun, something equally related to it happens almost immediately, and it's related. Let me give a quick example. After the show last month, I had a little episode and I had to go into the hospital for another, what they call angiogram, where they take a look inside your heart, and it turned out to be nothing. What triggered it was a gastrointestinal problem I have, and it causes symptoms that are identical to heart attacks. Well, I come back from the hospital, and like I said, one of my favorite shows is Dr. Reiner's show. And lo and behold, the first show he does when I get back is a show about this diseases that affect the gastrointestinal, which mimic heart attack symptoms. And that's what I mean by a synchronicity. Now, going back to the New World Order, you go 1776, the Illuminati, Weishaupt, and this sphere of influence that seemed to be spreading throughout Europe at the time, and certainly, like I said, absolutely by 1913, had spread to America. We're still working on the technical aspect, so our attention sometimes deviates. You want to get anything?
Just a little known fact is that the international banking, a lot of people try to blame or at least cast shadows of suspicion over the Freemasons for being involved in the New World Order, and it's not true. There are Masons, I'm sure, that are in the New World Order because it's a large group, but that's just like saying that every Catholic or every left-handed person is also in the New World Order, and that's not true. But when you go back in history, the first international banking was created by the Knights Templar when in the Middle Ages, and what the Templars did was they created, because of the Crusades and the pilgrimages from Europe into the Holy Land, there had to be a series of fortifications along the way to protect the people, and also when you had money in those days, there was very little you could do. Basically, there was no international banking at the time, so they would give their money to the Templars. Say if you lived in France and you'd put your money in a vault in a Templar vault in France, and then they would give you, would be like a bank card, and then by the time you got, when you went along the way, they would give you credits for, as you went, say, from France to Italy, into the Middle East, and you would be given credits along the way and on the way back, and then so you never lost your money, but you didn't have to worry about being robbed and killed over the money you brought with you because you had those credits already stored for you in France or wherever you started at. So when the Templars were destroyed, basically, the Inquisition began in 1307, and a few years later, there were no vestiges left of the Knights Templar, and they just disappeared. And they disappeared with lots of money and treasure. And that was in, what was that movie with Nicolas Cage? National Treasure. And in that movie, they had everything was hidden in Washington, D.C. That said, the King of France and the Pope tried to steal everything that the Templars had, and it didn't work. And it was all ended up well concealed. And where did all that money go? Gee, ever heard of Switzerland?
Exactly.
And Switzerland, of course, is a major concern in world banking today, and has been since the Middle Ages. And if you ever look at the Templar flag, the Templar flag, well, they had several, but the one with it had a red cross, red Maltese cross, and it was on a white background. And Switzerland has it's not a Maltese cross, but it's an equilateral cross where all the appendages are the same size, and it's also but it's on a red background, white on red, which is they just basically flipped the color scheme, yeah, and they changed the cross a little bit, but that's where it all ended up. And anyway, so Switzerland basically is like the center of world banking today.
Absolutely, and again, if you go through many, and by the way, obviously none of us were that old that we were there, so you got to rely on your research, and most importantly to me, you got to use this thing that is a tremendous machine that so many don't use enough. You got to use your own mind and say, do these facts in history, or this version of history, equate to what's going on right now? And the history that we more or less accept, like we accept absolutely. There was a World War II. There was a World War Now there's a bunch of stuff going on that they don't even call wars. But certainly none of the history that I was taught in school ever led us to where we are now. Either economically, militarily, geopolitically, you name it, it just don't make any sense. And I think that's one of the great appeals of Trump, is he's saying also, none of this makes sense and we're not going to take the BS anymore. The Dave Champion, what is it, Totally Unprepared. To me, it's a great, great show. And I agree with very, very many of their opinions on everything. I disagree on some. But the bottom line is there are so many people that have strong opinions based on what they've researched, hopefully. I hope it's not based on what someone else said that they went along with.
Right.
In other words, don't be one of the herd. Make your own decisions. If you agree with things we said, fine. If not, fine.
I'm glad you brought that up because it's always been a pet peeve of mine. There is educated people, and I get in arguments with them, and they're well read and they're educated, but they'll look me right in the eye and they'll make some statement that obviously was parroted by somebody else, and just because somebody else said it, just because it's in a book, doesn't make it true. And what I suggest people do, and what I always do myself, is I use my brain to be the arbiter, or actually the judge on what is BS and what is truth. And I may be wrong, but what I do is I use my own common sense and I read as much as I can. And so instead of just parroting something that somebody else says, unless I really truly adhere to that, I try not to agree totally with anyone, because nobody is always right and nobody is always wrong, and most of it's somewhere in between. But when you're inundated with all the lies and the deceit from just everybody that's in top government all the way down to your local neighborhood, it's really difficult to ever get a real a clear view of what's really happening.
Right, and hopefully in the future, if Amy's watching, we're still working on it, but we'll get into this idea behind quantum physics, or some of the amazing discoveries that's been found in quantum physics.
We got to take a break here.
Okay.